Consider supporting Archaeosoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you. Good afternoon, Neil Ackerman.
Hello.
Good, hello. Now, the fine folk at home may be wondering who you are, although hopefully from the video title it'll be clear. But can you just explain how it is that we came to be in touch with each other?
Yeah, I was involved with this not ancient stone circle, as it turned out, working with Aberdeenshire Council, with Adam Welfare as well at Hess, and I won the exciting Muppet of the Month award.
No, to be fair, you didn't win it. It wasn't directed at you directly, but
no.
I like that you've asked for a framed copy. We'll definitely send one over if we can. But
it's just to go into some of the detail, because there's a few kind of questions that you were asking about during that. So it's just to kind of give a bit more background, and so I got in touch with you, and here we are.
Okay, cool. So just for catch up then, for those of you at home, if you are interested in this, I'll put a link to that video and also the related news story below. But if you want a bit of a catch up anyway, it's probably worthwhile going through, if we can, I suppose, the timeline of how this stone circle came to your attention, and also I suppose in what capacity, in so much as for example, did you visit the site and all these other things? So what happened then? How did this come about?
It was, at the time I was working with Aberdeenshire Council, their archaeology service, and a few days a week I lived way out in a kind of D-side area, so I'd work from a local office. And there was someone from Building Standards there who owns the neighbouring farm from this stone circle. And she said to me, there's a stone circle in the farm next to me. And the current owners are wondering about it. They couldn't find anything about it. And my initial reaction to her was, it'll just be some farmer that's put some stones in a circle. And I think next time I'll listen to my first answer a bit more closely. So I said to her, right, send me some pictures and take it from there, not thinking much of it. And then about a month or so later, she kind of sent some pictures to me, and I thought, that actually looks a bit more interesting than I thought it was going to.
That is indeed stones in a circle.
It is indeed.
Yeah. And so then what happened?
Yeah, so I contacted Adam Welfare at that point at Historic Environment Scotland, because he's kind of a specialist in these types of monument, to say, this thing's popped up. What do you think? It looks more interesting than I thought it was going to. And then I went out and took some more pictures myself. And at the time it was kind of, this is strangely small, but it also looks strangely legit. So I sent Adam emails of those, and as it happened, he was going to be up in the area anyway. So then the two of us went out and had a look at it and did a proper kind of plane table survey of it and all that.
Okay.
And at that point, we were fairly convinced that it was a strange example, but it did seem to fit well enough. We had done a bunch of kind of desk-based work as well. The topography of the field means that if you're standing above it, you can't actually see the stone circle. It's in a slight dip. So it wasn't on any of the first or second edition OS maps that we could find, but that wasn't necessarily so surprising, given that if the mapper had been standing uphill from it and looking down and mapping that way, they would have missed it.
Yeah.
It's in a kind of patch of fairly dense gorse. So I had to look at Aberdeenshire Council have got a collection of the kind of 40s RAF aerial photos of the area. So I had to look at those, and the patch of gorse was there, but they've taken at such a height that I couldn't see a stone circle, but that didn't necessarily mean it wasn't there.
Right. So it was potentially a resolution issue in that sense.
Yeah. And it's just, but the patch of gorse was still there in exactly the same shape as it is now. And it's not that different to the rest of the field. So at that point I was thinking, well, if there's not stones there, why didn't they plough it and use it.
Mm.
It didn't make sense not to have ploughed it. So yeah, that was thinking at that point.
So what you're describing there is actually, I mean, essentially you've in a roundabout way answered one of the questions that we had in our discussion about this this potential act of Muppetry, in so much as there was essentially due diligence done. You visited the site, you did measurements, there was a sense of desk-based assessment, looking through aerial photography, this kind of thing. And initially, I mean, obviously, again, we didn't want to comment unduly on that, in so much as that there are parts of the country where access to aerial photography is difficult from certain periods. For example, local to me, there's like the collection is basically privately owned, so you can look at it, but you can't reference it, you can't copy it, you can't use it, basically. So again, we didn't really want to touch on that too much, I guess, but. I mean, so beyond that, then, how did you come to that initial conclusion and I suppose public statement about the age of the stone circle? Then,
I mean, it ticked a lot of the boxes. The recumbent stone circle typology, there's a lot of variation between them.
Yeah.
One of the one of the only constants is this recumbent setting. Which was
just again, just for the boys and girls at home, what is recumbent then in this context?
So basically, you've got all your stones standing up in a circle, as the name suggests, but there's one lying flat with a stone on either side, flanking it. And usually they're the largest ones, and they get smaller as they go round. And that recumbent setting is usually southwest, but kind of a bit of wiggle room in there. So this one, it had the setting, it was facing in the right direction. It didn't have some of the features that a lot of them do, but then a lot of them also don't have those kind of features like kind of curbstones or a cairn underneath it and things like that. We also kind of, by looking at the stones, they're a big feature of the area, and you do get people kind of putting up stone circles a fair amount of time, but they're usually
not that well done.
Yeah, well, not that well done, and obviously, and often quite obviously quarried and dressed, and they've found old stone that's been part of a building or something. And there's one that's not near where I used to live that you could see obvious kind of modern quarrying marks from the dynamite and stuff like that. It's so it's blatantly obvious. So this on the stones didn't have that. We had a good look at them. So yeah, it seemed to be, we knew we were going to have to be doing more research. Part of the reason I think I put the initial press release out was that, I mean, obviously the landowner knew about it, a few of the other local people knew about it, word was spreading anyway. And because I was working with the council, the local press at any point could just spring an FOI request on you, and then you have to very rapidly. If they just thought, this seems interesting, I'll just make the story happen now. So we're at a point to talk about it, so let's talk about it.
Okay. So, and I guess this is again one of the other element that was the big question mark for us was what was the relationship then between, I suppose you and anyone who you consulted with. I mean, for example, did you approach any special, outside specialists like university or other small companies?
Didn't, mainly because it had been Adam Welfare who I was talking to, and he was from Hess, which are we're not connected at all.
So in that sense, he was an independent specialist who kind of agreed. Yeah, okay. So so you had that sort of work done. So what was the relationship then between you, as I say, as that decision maker, and then the press release in that sense? I mean, was there a because for example, as I said in our video, when I tried to follow this up, it just sounded weird. Essentially, I did speak to Adam. He said he wasn't allowed to talk about it, which was odd, and then referred me to the press office. But in that sense, in the first instance, was there any outside influence or pressure to word it in such a way as to confirm what they wanted to see, or?
The first press release I put out through Aberdeenshire Council, it goes through the council communications team, and they, fix the typos and kind of make it look like the usual press
Like
release.
an archaeologist hasn't typed it, yeah.
Yes. So in a sense, it was that, and it had to be signed off by my superiors and bada bada bada. But I mean, I wrote it, and they fixed it and put it out. And then again, I put out a second press release, which got a lot of press kind of getting back in touch with us through that. Yeah. And then I think Hess did their own kind of little blog thing a few weeks later through their own comms teams. So me and Adam were in discussion, but it was obviously going through two different corporate bodies. So it's difficult to join up the dots in one corporate body for us between two.
No, that makes sense. So, I mean, I guess you were kind enough to send through an article that had been written on a different website, the Ars Technica website, as opposed to some of the news articles that we had come across. And this one had a wonderful subheading to it that says, "Sometimes doing good science means admitting you were wrong." And this is something that we were really quite excited about in terms of the possibilities of this story, because actually, frankly, you've been a very good sport in terms of actually you reaching out to me about this, but also just talking openly about the fact that sometimes things go wrong. I mean, and also, frankly, in the face of starting up your own little business, some people simply wouldn't want to talk about actually a very normal aspect of process, in so much as archaeological confirmation in that sense is not an exact science. But I'm curious as to where do you think, or at what point in this process do you think there was an element of confirmation bias in that sense? And I'm not asking you to sort of once again say mea culpa. It's more just a case of I'm fascinated, and I think it's really healthy to talk about this publicly, how it is that archaeologists approach a site. Where do you think that crept in, do you think?
I think probably with the first press release, when I said we've got this site, in hindsight I would have worded that more along the lines of, we think we've found this site and more work is ongoing. So, I mean, in mine and Adam's mind, I think we were fairly sure, but I mean, the fact we were still doing work, we obviously weren't 100% sure. No. So I think it's always difficult when you put out a press release, you want the press to actually pick up on it. And it's very difficult within archaeology, because you either say, we've definitely got this fantastic new thing, and all the press go, yay, or you think, oh, maybe we've got something, maybe not, and the press going to go, leave that. It's a really difficult balance between that, and also, I mean, you're wanting non-specialists to read it and be interested. So if you start going into all the technical details of your desk-based assessments and all this kind of stuff, then you immediately lose them. So it's a very difficult balance, I think. So I think that's possibly where it fell down a little bit. And this is something which I have come across with other colleagues and archaeologists before, is this sense of really wanting to tell that story and to share it as far as possible. But in this instance, why did you want to share that story? So in a way that would be read, if you see what I mean. I mean, was there? Were you personally quite excited at this prospect, or what? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, these things don't just crop up every other week. It was exciting, and it was. It's more exciting to say you've definitely got something. That's for sure. So yeah, there possibly was a bit of jumping the gun in that. I'm not, but yeah, I think it's more the way the research was taking us. We were beginning to see more issues with that being the definite thing. So I think probably there would have been a press release further down the line saying, actually, that might not be, an authentic ancient stone circle. As it happened, because the farmer who built it read it in the news and got in touch quite quickly. It very quickly went from yes, it's a real thing to no, it's not.
Well, and actually, so how could again, this is something I find so interesting. So if you had then sort of said, actually, it might not be, or it probably isn't, um, that one would probably get the meh response from journalists, wouldn't it? So
Yeah.
so in some respects, what floats up to the public consciousness is this notion of the stone circle, but follow-ups and again that aspect of best practice and process leading to a change in interpretation might not actually make it to the public. I find that very interesting because again, in that sense, someone. I mean, once obviously you put out the press release, someone from an editorial standpoint is looking to sell newspapers or whatever, or get clicks as well. Uh, how do you think then? What okay? What have you learned from this experience? What will you do differently in the future? Do you think, or indeed, has this had any effect on your archaeological outlook, or dare I say, even confidence? I mean,
I think
what's happened for you personally?
I think there was a bit of kind of when it first happened.
Hmm.
I mean, it's funny. Like
Yeah,
we had a laugh.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that was the initial reaction.
It was probably put up when Wonderwall was in the charts.
Yeah.
uh,
So yeah, we had a good laugh. I mean, it did knock my confidence a little bit, just initially, kind of like when you don't really know what the response is going to be.
yeah.
I had originally planned to do a presentation at the PATAC, the Twitter conference that happened at the end of January,
Uh-huh.
and I found out, a couple of weeks before that, actually this thing is modern, and I could have and possibly should have done it anyway.
Yeah.
I think there was a bit of a part of me that just thought, oh, I want to kind of just back off a little bit and ease off here. So I think in terms of what I've learned, firstly, maybe be a bit more cautious in the initial press release
Yeah. Yeah.
thing, and to explain that research is ongoing and etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because the second press release was way bigger in terms of press kind of interaction and public interaction than the first one, of it being at Stone Circle, which took me quite heavily by surprise. I think partly the news run that week was so kind of heavy and bleak and Brexit that there was I became basically the and finally story at the end of the news just to cheer everybody up a bit.
Yeah. There were no water skiing squirrels, so
yeah. And I think I also slightly underestimated my own Twitter account in that I put something up fairly glib and self-deprecating, thinking, oh, that'll get the usual 3 likes or whatever. And then everybody started embedding it in their online articles and all that. So that kind of took off. And then I think it kind of basically became a story about me as much as it did about the Stone Circle, which I wasn't anticipating. But I guess that's the joy of modern social media, isn't it?
Yeah, no, indeed, yeah. I suppose I wonder. So, because it sort of implies then that for many archaeologists, really a good act of public dissemination renders the archaeologist somewhat invisible. The site is at the heart of it, but then suddenly, as you say, you kind of became part of that story. But do you think then that there's been adequate coverage of the fact that archaeology, in that sense, is a process, or do you think that maybe the conversation went far too quickly down the path of archaeologists are just full of it and they don't know what they're doing? And
I think it did. I think it did a little bit from generally the public perception was quite good, and I mean there was the usual online comments that you get, but on the whole it was fairly good natured and just kind of, oh, we've all had one of those days type things.
Yeah, better luck next time.
Yeah. And actually the discussion on that, the article that I sent you was I found reading that actually quite interesting, because there's a lot of discussion about talking to the public about how science works and how socialism works, and I think in an era where the expert is being, I don't know what their role is, but it's kind of being looked at more closely and scrutinised. And I think perhaps humanising that in a way is almost quite an important thing to do. There's this whole, oh, scientists say this.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes it a fact. And I think being open about how things progress and how things change, especially in archaeology. I mean, you're using the information you've got from before you, and 20, 30 years time, what's kind of taught now and understood now will have changed. So I think it is important to do that, and I think there's, to my mind, a very good reason or good kind of the archaeologist almost should be a part of the site as it's reported, because it does affect what the outcome is.
Well, and I suppose there's a couple of things come to mind. I suppose it's what some archaeologists would call the interpretation at the trowel's edge, but also I guess it also relates. There is a certain amount of accountability, because even if this had been a stone circle, it is a stone circle. But even if it had been an ancient stone circle, prehistoric stone circle, some of its features were a bit odd. The fact that it wasn't as big as others and this kind of thing, there would have been questions, and people need to know how to follow up on that. Other archaeologists, if nothing else, there is that, I suppose. But I suppose finally, I've been fascinated by this story also from the standpoint that it kind of forces you to admit that objectively we have no actual proof that the past happened. We have evidence that stuff occurred before we were alive, but so one of my most one of those interesting case studies from my sort of thinking when I'm in the bath or something, is the question of, say, the Roman period. This idea of this beginning and end and things dramatically changing, whereas actually the day-to-day of that stuff, and even the fact that these people probably didn't even call themselves Romans or Tudors, or we don't call ourselves Neo-Elizabethans or whatever, do we? But nonetheless, people in the future will be referring to us in the same way that we try to understand the past today, and yet they'll never actually be able to talk to us. They'll never actually be able to interrogate our actual intentions. And I think there's something quite powerful in this case study in terms of actually helping us to think about how we relate to everything that happened before yesterday, if so I mean. Do you think in that sense? Do you think in that sense that you might reassess this whole escapade and maybe present it in that form, in a future conference? Or
I think, well, me and Adam have been planning on writing something up about it initially, and from the discussions we've had since then, that's not changed.
No,
we still would want to write something up on it. I think, from my point of view, there was some very interesting kind of discussions on Twitter and stuff like that came up about, someone saying, "Oh, it's not archaeology anymore." I thought it was. I was like, well, actually, is it not? Is it?
It is, yeah. My bin's archaeology.
So there's this whole kind of discussion that kind of arose out of that, and also some fairly humorous stories from other archaeologists of things they'd messed up or what have you. But I think the fact that you have what is essentially a recumbent stone circle that more or less fits the model, built a few thousand years later. If we were 1,000 years on, that would be absolutely fascinating. So, we place ourselves, for some reason, outside of the past. Whereas, in this case, as an archaeologist, you have the chance to talk to someone who's built a monument that is of interest, and it is just, there's a nice view. The farmer has had an interest in archaeology. He built it overlooking the nice view. But it does very closely reference, the prehistoric past and the identity of that area of Scotland, because it's quite specific to that area. So I think there are some really interesting discussions to have about what is archaeology and when do we start studying it or stop studying it.
Definitely, it's the Belloc conversation in Indiana Jones. Take this bucket, Wajindi, put it in the stand for 1,000 years, and it's worth £1 million. Um, but as you say, in that sense, it's just the time depth that makes that stone circle, as it were, illegitimate, if you want to call it that. But also at the same time, as you say, it's part of the landscape now, and and it is interesting to think that uh, well, actually, had all this not happened, as you say, it would have just simply been part of a data set for the future, and it does raise all these interesting questions about how and why we know the past occurred, and and it's a great opportunity to highlight how we know that other stone circles are actually, from Neolithic Bronze Age times, this kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, this has been really interesting, and I just want to just say that I respect the fact that you reached out. I think lots of archaeologists would have been, and I know some myself who would have been just embarrassed at this, but I'm so pleased to have been able to actually highlight this as an active process. So
Mm.
thank you again, thank you,
No, thank you.
and again, Ackerman Archaeology. I'll put links below. And also, as well, it's worthwhile saying you didn't start up this company because you had to run away
No.
from your
The
previous
timing was
job.
quite useful, as it turned out, in some respects, but no, it
Yeah.
was a pre-planned thing.
No, exactly, yeah. Never apologise. No, that's cool. Thank you again so much. And if you guys have any thoughts or questions, please do comment below. We'll have a look at it, and so I'm sure so will Neil here. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.